Hey, welcome to the process. My name is Dr. John Bush. This is lesson 101. I'm sorry, 102. Silly me. For the 2022 season, I did 100 lessons last year for the season. We're continuing on our journey here. The main question in this next block of material is how predictive is the ADP versus the end of the season. Okay, and so this data is looking towards the end of the ADP in August and looking at the end of the season results. So just be aware that ADP will change, month to month, and it might be the most accurate in August. It remains to be seen if that is the case. But it's a very interesting question. If ADP is predictive, then you would definitely want to pay attention to it. If it is not predictive, then you shouldn't pay attention to it and let your opponents go with it. And if it has areas in the draft where it's more predictive than others, that's important as well. So, and it may be positional as well. So it may be better at predicting quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, wide receivers. So it's important to keep this information going. Investigate the hypothesis, basically the scientific method here. So I'll do a few slides here for this lesson and we'll continue. Certainly you should start with lesson 101. So let's continue. So the first thing I've done, and I think if you look at the previous lesson, I kind of set this up. This is strictly looking at running backs and wide receivers. And then I look across ADP sectors, and I'm looking using, and that should be 2015 to 2021. So 7-year window here, so get enough data points. And we see some information here. This is the sector, so this is blocks of 6, and the visual side of this data is here, ADP sectors, and then I have something called positional dominance, and if there's more running backs or wide receivers, then I note that one is dominant over the other, and if they're both nearly the same, I put this purple line here, the R/W here. So you can see the blue is where running backs are dominant, wide receivers, running backs, etc. So, and then I plotted this information out, and as this shows, running backs are dominating, have dominated, probably will dominate in 2022. In the first 12 picks, the first two sectors, 1 to 12th pick, followed by a domination of wide receivers, then an area where they're pretty much the same, followed by 3 wide receiver sectors, a running back sector, they're the same, and then so forth. So what I have shown is this tendency to move between one and the other. And I think part of that is the concern that in your draft you're missing out on something and you want to be balanced. I'm not sure balance is the way to go. You may have heard of zero RB, where people deliberately unbalance their early picks away from the running backs to wide receivers, quarterback, and tight ends. RB heavy would be biasing the picks towards probably 2, 3, 4 running backs before you pick up a wide receiver. So you can scheme and steer, your draft as you see fit. This is just showing you what the public has done in the past. And so I guess one might say, well, you either follow them or get out of the way and do your own thing. Or, some people, I don't pay attention to this. I take value. And again, I ask the question, what is value? Some people define value as a player that makes them money at the end of the season. That can be value. Some people, he's worth, i.e., and I guess fantasy points per game, more than I'm having to pay for him in terms of this concept called draft capital. So it's still nebulous, and it's murky regardless of what people try to say, do out in the world, the pundits. It's unclear to me exactly the precision that's gained by having some value rules or not having value rules. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just not sure that's fully been teased out. And I think people just kind of go shoot from the hip kind of approaches that may or may not be successful. And remember, just by chance, if you have 12 teams, you would think if everybody's the same skill, you should have a 1 in 12 shot of winning the league. That's probably not how it is. It's probably skewed to 3, 4 players, but still, by random chance, some people that are maybe not the best team will win. It happens. There is variation weekly, right? Consistency can come into play, and you have some good matchups during the playoffs. So it's not settled at all. But anyway, this is the scheme. It looks like that everybody's grabbing a running back and then jumping to 1, maybe 2 wide receivers, or maybe another running back. And certainly by the 4th pick, they probably got 2 and 2. And you can kind of see how that tends to stretch here. And if you look, there's only 6 ADP sectors where running backs are dominant versus, what is that? Was it 6, 8, 10, 13, 14 where wide receivers are dominating. So, and of course that's later, but there are areas where there's lots of wide receivers being picked here. So you can kind of predict you'll see a lot of wide receivers going here and going in these blocks. So you just need to be prepared. I'm not saying you should go one or the other. I just think you need to be aware of what the tendencies are. And before you start your draft, think about this pattern, maybe even print this out, do a screenshot, print this out, and just kind of see what's going on here in your league. Okay, so I then did the same thing with tight ends and quarterbacks. And what we see is people, if you're going to take an early tight end, it tends to be after the first 6 picks. So some people are starting off with tight ends in their draft, and then Some people are taking quarterbacks early as well. So and then there's this idea of taking tight ends and quarterbacks late. There's not a lot of sectors where tight ends are dominant, only about 3 here in the main part of the draft. Whereas quarterbacks there's 10 sectors here. So people are probably getting, and this is just modified after a 1 quarterback league here. So people are grabbing 2 tight ends, and probably 2, 3 quarterbacks, maybe more, which is probably overkill. And some people say only take 1 of each. Injuries, COVID, that can be kind of tricky. Not saying I wouldn't do that. I have done that. I have taken 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks. It just kind of depends on the flow of the draft for me and what's available. If some key quarterbacks or tight ends are not drafted or falling down the board, sometimes I will bite on those. And but again, the patterns here and predictive wise, you should expect there's going to be a lot of tight ends in the first 3 rounds if people are going to pick them. And then probably in the next 3 or 4, there's going to be from the 43rd up to about the 66th, there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks taken. So it looks like a tight end quarterback kind of pattern here. That's it's not as clear cut as running backs, certainly, and wide receivers. But that's kind of the pattern going in here at this point. So depending on how deep my benches are would probably direct how I plan to take a quarterback and a tight end. Certainly a slim bench is probably not going to have multiple tight ends and quarterbacks, right? A deep bench, you probably have more room for that. So again, knowing the league, knowing the rules of the league and exactly what's going on as far as the bench size, and there may be some leagues limit the number of tight ends or quarterbacks you can have. Probably more in flex leagues maybe, but anyway, super flex. But this is not a super flex pattern here. This is a traditional 1 tight end, 1 quarterback minimum starting. Okay, so there's that journey there. And I think this chart to me is of interest. So I lined out these sectors in 6s all the way down from the 1st to the 156th pick. And I did eliminate kickers and defenses there. So I kind of squeezed in the data there, not really playing that. And then column 1 looks like it got cut off in my PowerPoint there slide. That is the percent of quarterback, percent of tight end, percent of running back, percent of wide receiver. And that is the total percent in that sector. So each one of those columns will equal to 100%. So I'm not telling you the actual count numbers. I'm just giving you percentage here. And then I note by the first color in blue where 10% of that position has been drafted. In red, 25%, and in deeper blue with 50%, and then you see after 50% to the 100 here is not colorized. So you should kind of keep this in mind as well. This is showing us the same thing, but now we're looking at all of the 4 positions. So right away, what jumps out to me in the first 12 picks, 10% of all the running backs that will be drafted in your league in that draft are gone. So the top 10, presumably, at least people are predicting these are the top 10, are gone. So you need to decide probably early on. The early question is going to have to be if, in the top 10, versus is there any running backs, say, in the 11th through 20th slots of running backs? Are there any in that region that have the potential to be in the top running back? In other words, the public missed them. Okay, they're missing something. So in your homework, I would use this kind of information to make some plans here. In other words, plan and do research on running backs, 11 through 20th, right? Or even deeper. Trying to find where the situation is. And by the 30th sector, 25% or a quarter of the running backs are gone. So notice those are disappearing. They're becoming very scarce by and close to the third round. So people have probably grabbed 2 running backs on average there in the first 3 rounds. So you need to decide how you're going to play that. Some people say take 1 running back and 2 wide receivers and then come back for a later running back. So again, you've got to make some plans based on your valuation, or if you pay an expert for their ranks, see what they're saying. Are there some so-called value RBs here? And the only thing that I would worry in these patterns and listening is sometimes the concepts are paraded out there without a lot of deeper research. So people are just declaring things and they don't have the stats or the data to back it up. And so that becomes something of a mantra, and you can get sucked. It's kind of like, you're walking down the street and all of a sudden 10 or 15 people are running in the opposite direction, right? You're like, well, what are they fleeing? Is there, a mountain lion coming down the road, or is there somebody shooting something? What's going on here? You need to, does the crowd influence you? And I think last year I have some lessons on figuring out your personality a little bit, because you're going to be tested when there are runs of different positions. And, it's where everybody's grabbing, 2 running backs. I guess I need to. If it makes sense, okay. But if it doesn't make sense, if you're just responding in a knee-jerk way, I'm not sure that's the best approach. But this kind of data here, to me, gives you some ideas about what is probably going to happen, and you need to decide how are you going to handle that. And 50% of the running backs are gone by the 5th round or so. 50%. So now you're left with the bottom 50% here. And I assure you that it gets hard to find scraps of value. At that point, you're almost left with taking the backups here and hoping for some type of controversy. The player's not hot, or maybe there's an injury, unfortunately, or COVID or something. So then you're relying on something other than your assessment. You're hoping for some luck here. And last season, you had to be having the handcuff concept. You used handcuff to the handcuffs almost with all the COVID that ran here. Running back crews were getting 5, 6 deep. And so those are the kind of players that are going to be available to you after the 5th round. So again, each sector here is a different type of running back and what is going on, and you need to study that a little bit. I would say, and just I'm going to use the vernacular, with the running backs, the top 10%, that's your studs. Then the next, say 15%, maybe those are some overlooked sleeper types. And then the next block are running backs that maybe are undervalued. People are not, really missing how they're going to be used. Maybe they're pass catching running backs. Something's going on there. And then the deep handcuffs are going to be probably after round 6 and 7. In those, that's what you're looking. So you need to define exactly what's happening at each part of the draft here. Just kind of have a timeline and decide, what is happening at each sector and how are you going to respond. Okay. Wide receivers. Wide receivers are about 6 picks behind the running backs. So you have a little more leeway there. What I mean is the 10% of wide receivers are gone by the 18th pick, whereas running back the 12th. So people are picking an RB and a WR early. So they're trying to grab a stud running back and a stud wide receiver. So they're top 2. And then some people are grabbing a running back and then coming back with their second wide receiver. Notice the balance there. Then they're coming back with another and another. So by the 6th round, you got 3 and 3. That's that tendency, that's that trend that makes you feel good about it. You feel like, oh, I've got it all balanced and covered. I guess I feel safe. Never feel comfortable in the draft. Okay, if you get sleepy and just kind of drone on and just kind of go with the flow, you're probably not winning your draft. Okay, you should always be uncomfortable. You should always have anxiety about what's going on, and you need to use that anxiety to drive, your plans, drive your research. That's what I would focus on. So now, as running backs are going, a lot of the wide receivers are going. How does that fit in with the quarterbacks and tight ends? Quite differently. Notice that when 25% of the running backs and wide receivers are gone, you're still in the 10 percentile of quarterbacks and tight ends. So some people are grabbing 2, and then a quarterback tight end by the 6th round. So that's still perceived as balance. I grabbed a good quarterback, grabbed a good tight end, 2 and 2. I feel safe. Again, that's, that should be when you should get really worried. And notice the 25 percentile for tight ends is a little bit ahead. And 50%, they're both the same by the 91st to the 96th sector here. So the quarterbacks are catching up as the draft continues. So people are definitely grabbing 1 and 2 here and probably grabbing 2 quarterbacks. So by the 97th pick, people probably have 3. So what is 90? Was that like 9 picks, so 3, and maybe a quarterback and maybe a tight end and a quarterback, maybe 2 quarterbacks, or maybe 1, and maybe 4-3, something like that. And that's that balance thing. People are feeling like the balance is going on. Another aspect that I use this for is in conjunction with some other methods in best ball. But I think you can use this kind of global 7-year window and use that in best ball to kind of test what you're thinking about and how you're going to respond to these things. So best ball can be a little different. And again, this is redraft, PPR, 1 quarterback type league here. Okay, so this is not anything exotic here. I've got some ideas. I probably need to post my lessons on best ball and how I get a little deeper on my predictions to try to predict what's happening there. It's pretty straightforward. It's nothing big secret there. But I use cheap best ball. You can play best ball for probably $1 or $2 or $3, something like that, $5 out there. It is worth versus versus a mock draft on ESPN or something. These people come in and they'll just act a fool, like I'm going to draft every Dallas Cowboy. That's going to skew everything, okay? They don't have the cojones to do that in a real money draft, okay? But they're going to screw up the mock or whatever. You know, some people will take a pick or two and then leave. So that can get it all goofed up. So that's why I use best ball in place of mock drafting. Okay, very cheap. So get you, if you're going to do a $5, you can play 20. So spread those out. Right now I've already played 2 in February. I'll probably play a couple more, and about June probably start getting serious about predicting and doing my redrafts. Okay, but I'll kind of do a lot more best balls between now and June. Sometimes I've done 50 to 100 of those. Okay, so I'll really, and especially after the draft and where everybody in free agency and everybody's ending up, it gets a lot more predictable about what rookies or free agents are finding themselves in a good or not so good position. And so if you draft too early, you could get an advantage, right? But then you're relying on the draft and free agency fate almost. So you're definitely a gambling spirit drafting way too early. So anyway, that's how I would suggest you use this kind of information. And I think it's really nice and straightforward for us to do. So I think in combination with best balls and looking at the other patterns, the domination patterns, I call them, and the percentile patterns, you can kind of draw and make kind of global scale predictions. And you're saying, well, last year I understand, right? We're talking large samples, right? This is 7 years of data. Okay, so there's always going to be screwy drafts. People just, for whatever reason, they want to get crazy and waste money, then that's fine. Let them waste money, right? Whatever. So anyway, that's what I would do. So this is the end of lesson 102 here. I'm kind of keeping my lessons early on in the season to around 30 minutes, so maybe it's a little easier for you to go through. Anyway, come back. I will continue looking at the hypothesis, how predictive ADPs are to end of season. And we're getting ready to start touching on that even more. But this is kind of some run-up data there. So come back. Hope you're having fun. My name is Dr. John Bush. This is The Process. I will be posting this on fakepigskin.com. As long as they'll have me, I guess they'll have me this year. If not, they'll throw me away. I'll figure some place to land if they do. If not, I've got a whole area called the Professor's Classroom that I'm going to post these as well. So you can find me there and follow me on Twitter and Professor Fantasy One. That's me. You can find me. And welcome aboard if you've never been involved in my lessons before lesson plan. Okay, class is dismissed till next time we meet. Let's get going. Get to work. Okay, later.